What's up, guys? This is Matt Singer from ScreenCrush.com, and today we're counting down the top 5 X-Men movies that were never made. Logan is the 10th big screen adaptation of Marvel Comics' most popular property, and it's the 3rd big screen adaptation focusing on the X-Men's most popular member, Wolverine. He's the best there is at what he does, and what he does isn't very nice, especially when it involves Liev Schreiber running on all fours like a dog. Woof. There are 10 X-Men movies, but there's at least 5 other X-Men movie projects that never quite got off the ground. Today on Top 5, let's do our best impression of Uatu the Watcher and play What If, counting down the coolest X-Men movies that were never made, starting with number 5, 1984's X-Men. The earliest serious attempt to make an X-Men movie dates to the mid-1980s when 2 comic book writers, Roy Thomas and Jerry Conway, were hired by Orion Pictures to write a screenplay about Marvel's Merry Mutants. At the time, there might not have been a more qualified writing team to take on the X-Men. Both had extensive histories at Marvel, and they'd recently helped to write the screenplay for Conan the Destroyer, the second Arnold Schwarzenegger Conan movie, which is a lot of fun and includes this great scene.
I suppose nothing hurts you.
Only pain.
Thomas and Conway's X-Men screenplay featured a team comprised of Professor X, Cyclops, Kitty Pryde, Wolverine, Storm, Nightcrawler, Colossus, and a new character named Circe, who was a pop star who could transmute matter, a power that really would have been useful around the halls of Orion Pictures to create some fast money. Because right around the time Thomas and Conway turned in their script, the studio found itself strapped for cash, which pretty much killed the project dead before it was even born. It's too bad, too. It's so rare that real comic book talents get to apply their knowledge and love of the medium on the big screen. Sadly, at this time, Hollywood executives were basically like the Blob when it came to comic book movies. Nothing moved them.
Hey, guess what?
On to number 4, James Cameron and Catherine Bigelow's X-Men. A couple of years after Thomas and Conway took a crack at turning X-Men into a film franchise, Stan Lee and longtime X-Men writer Chris Claremont took the material to Lightstorm Entertainment, the production company of James Cameron, who is quickly becoming one of the most talked about directors in Hollywood after films like The Terminator and Aliens. As Chris Claremont told it in 2012, Cameron would have produced the film, and Catherine Bigelow, the woman behind the original Point Break and Zero Dark 30, would have directed it. And their cast could have included Angela Bassett as Storm and Bob Hoskins, yes, Bob Hoskins, as Wolverine. Okay, so maybe that wasn't the best idea, but still, James Cameron and Catherine Bigelow collaborating with Chris Claremont and Stan Lee on an X-Men movie? The mind boggles more than a hellion during one of Emma Frost's final exams. Sadly, it was Stan the Man who inadvertently sunk this project. During the meeting at Lightstorm, Lee said to Cameron, "I hear you like Spider-Man." And the filmmaker's eyes reportedly lit up. Suddenly, all Cameron could talk about was Spidey. Sure enough, Cameron soon turned his attentions to a Spider-Man movie, which would have been a decent trade-off for an X-Men movie, except for one little problem. The Spider-Man movie never happened either. Damn you, Stan. You don't bring a Spider-Man to an X-Men movie? What happened to using great power responsibly? Did you learn nothing from your own most famous line of dialogue? Now it's time for number 3, Michael Chabon's X-Men. Before he wrote one of the greatest novels ever on the subject of comic books, 2000's The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay, novelist Michael Chabon pitched his version of X-Men to Fox. They didn't buy his concept, but the treatment he wrote, which is called Revenge of Wolverine, is available online. It's not hard to see why Fox rejected it. It's pretty different in a lot of ways from classic X-Men concepts, but it's also easy to see how, in the right hands, Chabon's X-Men could have been awesome. As the title suggests, his concept focused on Wolverine joining the X-Men in a way that's vaguely similar to Bryan Singer's first X-Men movie, which came out a few years later. But unlike Singer's film, Chabon's version featured a lot more X-Men, including Nightcrawler and Jubilee. In an interesting twist, his Wolverine would have also been revealed as a carrier of the Legacy virus, which he accidentally passes to Jean Grey. Chabon also wanted to focus on the different factions within mutant kind, including a scene that he described as half Godfather, half Star Wars, where the X-Men meet various other mutants at a private club in New York City, which would have been destroyed by the movie's villains, the League of Gentlemen. It's definitely a departure from the source material, but one that shows a lot of love and knowledge for that source material, with tons of clever new riffs on classic concepts. Obviously, the ship has sailed on a Chabon X-Men movie, but what about turning this into a comic? That'd be a day of futures past you could really get excited about. On to number 2, Bryan Singer and Matthew Vaughn's X-Men 3. If you're watching this video right now, odds are pretty good you've seen the third X-Men movie we did get, X-Men The Last Stand, which was not actually the team's last stand and also turned out like this.
Don't you know who I am? I'm the Juggernaut, bitch!
Some of the blame for this mess definitely falls on director Brett Ratner. But it's also worth noting that Ratner was brought in as a last-minute replacement after the previous director on the film, Matthew Vaughn, dropped out during pre-production. And Vaughn was a replacement for Bryan Singer, who had made X-Men and X2, but then quit the project to make Superman Returns. With each new director came new changes, which sometimes fit uncomfortably with what had previously been conceived by Singer and Vaughn. Singer wanted to focus on the return of Jean Grey and her manipulation by Emma Frost, a role Singer hoped would be played by Sigourney Weaver. The story would have culminated with Jean Grey dying once again, but then being reborn as a god-like being. Those phoenixes, man, they sure do rise from the ashes. Vaughn would later claim that his version of the film would have been 40 minutes longer, with more emotion and drama around the constant action. Sadly, we'll never know if he was right. Interestingly, both Singer and Vaughn did get other cracks at the X-Men. Vaughn got to direct X-Men First Class, and Singer returned to direct its sequels, X-Men Days of Future Past and X-Men Apocalypse. Shockingly, Brett Ratner has not been invited back to direct another X-Men movie. Now it's time for the number 1 X-Men movie that was never made, X-Men Origins Magneto. After X-Men The Last Stand crapped the Danger Room, the series shifted direction, from team-based movies to solo films that would have focused on the earliest days of the most popular mutants in the franchise. 2 films were initially planned, X-Men Origins Wolverine and X-Men Origins Magneto. The Master of Magnetism solo film was written by Sheldon Turner, who pitched the project as The Pianist Meets X-Men and would have followed the young Magneto as he fought to survive in a Nazi concentration camp and later hunted down the Nazi war criminals responsible for the atrocities he witnessed. Professor Xavier would have played a key supporting role as an Allied soldier who helped liberate the concentration camp, and the ambitious movie would have featured Ian McKellen returning as Magneto, with his face digitally de-aged in much the same fashion as the prologue from X-Men The Last Stand. Okay, so McKellen barely looked human playing 20 years younger. Playing 50 years younger might have been a real stretch, particularly in a leading role. Whatever the reason, whether it was McKellen's age or the mild wretchedness of X-Men Origins Wolverine, the series shifted direction again, back to team movies. Some of the concepts from Turner's Magneto script did find their way into the story of X-Men First Class, where a young Magneto, played by Michael Fassbender, hunts down Nazis in the years after World War II. In fact, the Magneto stuff was probably the best part of First Class, proving once again that mutation is a beautiful process, whether in people or in movies. For Screen Crush, I'm Matt Singer. Thanks for watching, and for even more, make sure to subscribe, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and get the latest movie and TV news on ScreenCrush.com.